Hello everybody, my name is Rachel Smith. I work for trueFIT Healthcare. We are an executive healthcare recruiting firm. I specialize in the permanent placement of healthcare professionals. I do most of my business in Central Florida, but I am nationwide. A little bit about me is I began my career in healthcare as a dental assistant back in 2007. I was a certified dental assistant, and I assisted on general dentistry mostly, but I did do periodontics, endodontics, oral surgery, which happens to be my favorite, believe it or not. And I had the opportunity to work with some really great dentists in Central Florida, and it gave me an opportunity to see how important patient care is, which really led me into the career that I'm at now. I continued on my education as a dental assistant and graduated from University of Central Florida with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. So hiring, it is honestly one of the most important decisions employers can make. There's not really a lot of other there's not a lot of other decisions that can really affect your business so much as hiring. You know, if you hire the wrong person, and they're bad to your patients, they don't take care of your patients, they're late, they are neglectful, then your business can go down the drain, especially with online reviews now these days. If you're having high turnover, your staff isn't competent, people are going to write about it, people are going to review you, they're going to talk, and it spreads so much faster than when it used to just be word of mouth. Now that it's online, you're reaching a whole new level of audience, and you really have to focus on hiring the right people to make sure you take care of your investment, which is your business. There's no 100% foolproof way to make sure that you're not hiring a bad candidate. So what you want to do is just minimize the amount of exposure risk that you have to hiring a candidate that isn't who they say they are or that's going to neglect your patients. And it's more difficult for a hiring manager to compensate for the fact that you have high turnover, incompetent employees than it is for you to invest into your recruiting efforts. How hiring mistakes happen? Well, biggest number one thing is an urgency. I need this position filled right now. So we're going to just put an ad up online. I don't care who applies. I just need somebody in the seat right now. Well, that is going to cost you big bucks because you didn't take the time, you didn't call their references, you didn't do a background check, and all of a sudden you've got somebody in there that you're paying for, you're paying to train, that is not doing their work, that's causing more work for your other employees, it's treating your patients bad and ruining your reputation. So you think that you cannot afford a recruiter. That's my number one thing I hear, especially from small practices here in Central Florida. I don't have the money to invest in a recruiter. I don't have, the resources to do that. Well, they're spending $300 a month on Career Builder, at least, minimum, monthly, for one position. And I can tell you from personal experience in my first recruiting job, when you put an ad online, 95% of the resumes you get from that investment are unusable resumes. They don't have the skills you ask for. So that's money down the drain right away. It costs between, when I put the numbers to it, I sent a survey out to all my clients and asked them how long it takes you to hire on your own, what's your investment on Career Builder, LinkedIn, Monster, what does it cost when you are replacing an employee after you train, interview. For a lower level position, you're looking at 2.5% of their annual salary to replace them. And because you have to pay your HR person to interview, screen. That's not all they do all day long. They're not a dedicated screening person. They don't know what they're looking for. They're just going with their gut instinct and hiring somebody. It's not specialized, and you're wasting your money. And I know physician offices these days, they can't afford to just throw money down the drain and not spend in recruiting, which is your number one tool to reach your patients and take care of your patients and grow your practice. So when I sent out this survey, I also asked, what is the typical time that it takes you to realize how long it takes you to realize that you've made a hiring mistake? And it takes between 60 and 90 days to realize that this person isn't who they say they were. Most of the time, they do not do background checks. I do all the background checks for you. I do all the reference checks of employers, personal reference checks, just to make sure that it all checks out, and the person says what they do. Another thing that I advocate for a lot is assessments, and I know candidates typically don't like to do assessments. A big one is for coding. They don't want to do the assessments. They don't want to spend the money on the assessments. But you're going to pay somebody $65,000 a year to produce for you to make money, and they can't produce. So you're skipping all the necessary steps that it takes to run your business because you want to save some money, and now your business fails. And that's why it is crucial to invest in your hiring practices. Some other failed hiring mistakes is not asking every candidate the same questions every time. I talk to so many HR reps, and they just go in and they talk to the candidate. They can become friends with them or build a good rapport during the interview, and that's a big, big mistake because you're not giving that candidate the same shot as you did candidate 2. You asked them the hard questions, they didn't do as well, but you thought this one was friendly, so you go with this one. There's no method to your hiring practices, and that's costing you big also. Another big problem is the limited pool of candidates that most HR office managers receive, especially if they're just receiving an inflow of applications. They're not going out and hunting, seeking out the passive candidates, seeking out who's the most qualified, finding out, I reach out to my referral networks a lot, and I say, who would you recommend for this position? Who is the most qualified person that I can find in the industry? And that's the #1 candidates. It's not going to be the people that are on CareerBuilder or LinkedIn hunting for positions, moving positions every 3 months, because they're going to do the same thing to you. So when you work with a recruiting firm, they are going to go out and they're going to put their hands on that position. They're going to go out to the referrals and they're going to find out, who is the most qualified person in this position. And that's what you need to be looking for. Some other unwise hiring practices I see that I wanted to also cover. A big one I know, especially for our dental offices here in Central Florida, our practices here, is hiring your spouse to run the practice. And I know that that's really a trigger for most of us that are professional in the industry. And it's the biggest problem is, I know they're trying to save money, they're trying not to outsource it, but they're not an objective person. They're trying to hold on to too many finances. They're not investing in the right things, and it's biased to your other employees also. It also can be discrimination also if the other doctors in the practices are not allowed to hire their spouses to come in and be employed also. So it throws up a lot of red flags, and it's just a very bad idea to do. Hiring friends and family members, same thing. You just never want to mix personal life and your business because you ruin relationships. People embezzle and steal. Jeff Holt does a class on that, and it's often the people that are close to you that will rip you off because you trust them too much and you're not looking out after your own practice. Hiring based on age is another one that's really dear to my heart. It's a lot of our older people are getting looked over, and they still have great qualities. They still possess stronger work ethic than most in our workforce, and so overlooking them just based on age really makes it rough on everyone. And underpaying staff also. Underpaying your staff, that's an investment. You are going to try and save money on paying their salary, but you're just going to be training them, and they're going to be looking for their next opportunity, using your company as a stepping stone until they can get paid higher. So you're really hurting your own company by underpaying your staff. Characteristics of a bad hire. When you have a bad hire, they failure to produce the amount of work that they promised. They don't work well with other employees. There's fighting, there's nitpicking. I know offices that get catty, and that's a characteristic. You can see it start and unfold around 60 or 90 days. Everyone's fighting. Attendance problems, big time. If they're often the subject of a customer complaint, your patients complain about this person, that it's been a bad hire. And then also failure to meet assigned deadlines. This is a very interesting study that I found with CareerBuilder. 69% of employers that were surveyed in 2013 reported that they had negative effects on morale, legal issues, and lower productivity. And here's the cost of the bad hire. 41% of the companies say that the bad hire cost more than $25,000, and 25% said it cost more than $50,000 lower level positions. I went and did a little more digging because I tried to calculate how could it be that high, you know. For a mid-level practitioner, how can it really be that much? And what I uncovered, unfortunately, for most employers is, according to SHRM, they said it can be up to 5 times that amount. So when I was looking at it, you know, office manager, $65,000 a year, I mean, you're looking at over $300,000 a year on a bad hire potential because of fraud, lost opportunities, messing up with your patients leave you, your reputation. Those things are all invaluable. I mean, those are things that's going to be very hard to rebuild. If you are a victim of fraud, you are potentially lose out on hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars because you maybe didn't do a background check. You didn't do a reference checks on your employees. You just took their word for it. You went with your gut instinct. You didn't have a lot of candidates to pick from, so you just went with it because you really needed somebody in that job, and you can lose your business over it. Additionally, the longer the person stays in the position, it is going to cost you more. I know that it's an investment. I keep saying that, but you don't want to take away, you don't want to do it again. You don't have time to hire again. You still got to do your job. You're an office manager. I know I can't afford to rehire, but it's going to cost you more. The longer you let that person in there, especially if it's embezzlement or fraud, it just keeps stacking up. It's not going to get any better. So I went over some of this a little bit. Job boards cost between $400 and $1,000 a month. $400 is if you just have one position. Florida Hospital, big companies like that, they're paying tens of thousands of dollars every month on job boards alone, and 95% of the candidates are unusable. Time is money. I always equate that. If your office managers are the ones that are responsible for the hiring, so you're breaking down their salary. They're not recruiters, so it takes them a lot longer to source candidates from a very limited pool of candidates. They have to pre-screen, schedule, interview, do a background check, do our reference checks, and present the offer. Meanwhile, all of their other duties are still adding up. So when you want to save money by not hiring a recruiting firm or a staffing firm, you really need to break it down and take out their salary, all their time that they invest in it, because it ends up adding up a lot more. And training costs also is between, after I did my survey, most employers are spending between $7,000 and $10,000 on training their employees. So that is the end of my presentation. Please let me know if you guys have any questions at all.
How much time do you utilize at the place of employment to find out what their composition is with regards to their current workforce? You know,
every employer is different. And most of my clients come as referrals, so I get to know their business. So it's hard for me to answer how much time, but I definitely invest a significant amount in learning what their culture is, because that does set your employees up for success if you know what their office culture is, what they're looking for in an employee. So it is hard for me to put a number on it, but I do make an effort to do so. Anybody else?
You had mentioned a point saying that some of the questions that they asked the possible hires were not consistent.
Yes.
And you become friendly. But isn't there a law that you're supposed to ask the same question for every candidate so you don't?
Well, I think it's a law that you're not allowed to ask specific questions, you know, relating to marital status, your children, things like that. But who's really regulating what questions you ask to who? You know, more often than not, they just aren't going by any standards. They're just picking questions up out of the air, or they get to talk to somebody and they build a little bit of a relationship. So I'm not an attorney. I can't speak on what the legal issues are.